Hi, I'm Luke, and today I will be giving a devotional from Ecclesiastes 2, starting in verse 12 through 17, and then picking up again in verses 24 through 26. And the main question that I want to pose today is wisdom worthless? So with that, I'll read the entirety of the passage. Starting in verse 12, it says, "So I turned to consider wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do who comes after the king? Only what he has already done. Then I saw that there is more gain in wisdom than in folly, and as there is more gain in light than in darkness. The wise person has his eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. And yet I perceive that the same event happens to all of them. Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will also happen to me. So why then have I been so very wise? And I said to my heart that this also is vanity, for as the wise and the fool, there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that the days to come will always have been long forgotten. How the wise dies just like the fool. So I hated life, because what is done under the sun was grievous to me, for all is vanity and striving after the wind." And then in verse 24, it says, "There is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. Then I saw this also is from the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat or drink or have enjoyment? For the one who pleases him, God has given him wisdom and knowledge and joy. But the sinner, he has given the busyness of gathering and collecting, only to give to the one who pleases him. This also is vanity and striving after the wind." So my first point of this is, in this passage in verses 12 through the beginning of 14, is that wisdom is incomparably superior to folly. And we see that when he says in verse 13, "Only I saw that there is more gain in wisdom and as there in folly, just as there is more gain in light than in darkness." And as we know from light and dark, being in the light is so much superior than being in darkness and living in the light. You can glorify God so much easier when you live in the light as opposed to when you live in the darkness. And so as just him comparing wisdom and folly is automatic, that wisdom is of so much more value than foolishness could ever be, and that folly could ever be. And in the second half of 12, I want to point out that it says, "For what can the man does who comes after the king? Only what he has already been done." And when I was reading this at first, I was like, this kind of just like literally I can read the whole passage and not even mention this. How is this important at all? And then as I looked into it and as I read a commentary, it said that that when you come after somebody, when you seek to lead after somebody, and when people seek to lead after us, they are aspiring to be what we are. And so in the sense of this, the greatest that the man who can come after the king can be is he can be as good as the king. And so in saying that, when we lead people, we need to be an example to them. That's if they aspire to be like us, then that is something that they should be. And it is someone who pursues wisdom and not someone that pursues folly. And then the question that I want to ask is, Solomon seems like he is comparing wisdom in this passage to worthlessness. Because he says in verse 17, he says, "So I hated life because all that is under the sun was grievous to me, and all is vanity and striving after the wind." And he sees here that he even is comparing wisdom to strife and to striving after the wind, and that he's almost making it seem like wisdom is worthless. But we know that wisdom is to be desired. The Psalms say that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, and Proverbs expresses that again and again and again. And so it's something that we should wrestle with. Is wisdom worthless? So he points out again and again in verses 15 and 16, he says, "Then I perceived that the same event happens to all of them. Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool? What will happen to me? Why have I so been very wise?" He's saying, why am I being wise if when the foolish person dies, he's not remembered, but neither am I. When the wise dies, he's not remembered either. Because all is worthless. Because if we aren't remembered by our wisdom, then why are we pursuing it? Just like if we are to be remembered by our wealth, if we aren't remembered by that, why are we pursuing it? It's folly, it's strife. We see that again and again in this book. And so he says, "For the wise, as of the fool, there is no enduring remembrance. Because in the days that come, all will have long been forgotten." And he says, "So I hated life even." it caused him so much distress because we know that Solomon, who wrote this book, he asked God for wisdom. That's the whole reason that he's able to write this book, is because he pursued wisdom and he pursued knowledge. And so now for him to say that it's worthless, he's really been thinking, and he's really been distraught over what the actual purpose of him having knowledge is and what to do with his knowledge. So my second point is that there is true vanity in wisdom, of wisdom. And I had already touched on that a little bit, is that wisdom is in vanity in some sense, because you die. The wise die, the fool dies, and none are remembered. Some are remembered maybe for a word or a poem or a book, but that's not even close to how much they studied. If we read one quote from someone and we think that is a wise quote, imagine how much more he wrote. Imagine how much more he put in than just that one quote. And so, going down to verses 24 and 26, he talks about finding the purpose of your enjoyment, that these things are to be enjoyed when you can have the purpose in them. And I'll read those verses again. Starting in verse 24, he says, "There is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw from the hand of God, for apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? For to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner, he has given the busyness of gathering and collecting, only to give the one who pleases God. This is also vanity and striving after the wind." And I wrote down here that as I've been at Biola, I've been pushed to study and to study hard while I'm here, and to learn a lot. And I've already felt overwhelmed at times with how much I'm required to learn. In all of this learning, we're also, in our first year SEM class, we're taught to actively pursue humility. And when you're, not only are you pushed to learn, but you're also pushed to be humble about it, then as sometimes I found myself questioning, what's the point of all of this knowledge? When number one, you can't be prideful about it. And number two, it's worthless anyway, because if you don't pursue the Lord through it, then it becomes worthless. And so what is the true purpose of it? And in verses 24 and 25, we see that we will not find true enjoyment unless we pursue it through Christ. And through Christ, all the toil of our labor and all the fruit of it will be enjoyed to its fullness. And so we are to please God by feasting and giving thanks to him for his gift, because they are only to be enjoyable to him. The overarching message of that passage is that anything that God has given to us to enjoy truly is worthless, truly is vanity. It's all striving after the wind unless you enjoy it through Christ. So how do we do that? An analogy that I thought of is when I'm at Disneyland and I'm always having to cooperate, when I'm with my family, I always seem to have to cooperate with what they're doing. Like, I want to do this route, I want to go sit down over here, I want to go to this restaurant, and they all want to do something else. And I'm like, oh, well, why am I here? It's on vacation. Why do I have to give up what I want to do? Why can't we do what I want? And so I'm like, gosh, sometimes I think it would be so much easier if I was just alone at Disneyland. So much easier if I could just go ride what ride I want, not have to wait for a party of 7 people to get on a ride, but to be able to skip it and go by myself. But then I thought about it. How fun would it be for me at Disneyland all alone? Sure, the first 2 or 3 rides I might actually really enjoy. Might enjoy skipping the line, having so much time. But what would I have time for? What would I need more time for? When you're alone, you don't have anybody to spend it with. Sure, you might save money by only buying one ticket, by only having to pay for one person's meal, by being able to only buy one $10 popcorn instead of 7. But what are you saving that money for? What's it going to benefit me? What's it going to benefit me if I do it alone? I will find no enjoyment in doing something all alone, even if it is the happiest place on earth. Even if I do enjoy it when my family's there, if I do it alone, I won't get nearly as much enjoyment as if I do it with others, because that's what even something so frivolous as Disneyland was created for, is for you to enjoy it in community. There's nothing that says that you will enjoy Disneyland on its own, because everybody knows that's pointless. The whole point of it is to experience it with people and to have fun with people, and just for those things to be an outlet of how you could truly enjoy it. If I went to the head of Disneyland and I said, Disneyland was not fun, I was there alone the whole time, nobody talked to me, he would say, why did you come alone? Don't you know that you're supposed to enjoy it with others? You're supposed to enjoy it with your family. If you come alone, it relinquishes the whole point of the experience. And in the same way, that's how God wants to enjoy him. He knows that his gifts are to be enjoyed through him, through others, and that we enjoy them the most when we do them with others. In Psalm 103, he says that The Lord knows our frame. David writes that he remembers that we are dust and that our days pass away like grass, and that the wind passes over and our days are gone, and its place knows it no more, and we are not remembered by our good deeds, and we are not remembered by our wisdom, we are not remembered by our knowledge, we are not remembered through our works, but we are remembered through our God. He knows that his gifts ought to be enjoyed, and he knows which of his gifts bringeth the most enjoyment, and he knows how his gifts ought to be enjoyed. And in all of this, if you give the glory to Christ, you will be fulfilled, and the gifts will be multiplied through you. And so as we look back on this passage, and as if you read the rest of Ephesians, you'll see that he starts out talking about how everything is vanity, how everything is evil, how all of it is evil under the sun, how even the things that God's given us to enjoy are vanity without him. And then he goes into how we should fear God, and how we should still pursue the gifts, and how good the gifts are through them. So with that, if I was giving it a real devotional, I'd pray. So I'll pray now, but I'll stop the video.